Long ago, in a village named Zuma, nestled deep within a valley surrounded by dense, towering forests, the people lived harmoniously, bound by a shared sense of tradition and community. Zuma was a place where customs were not just followed but cherished, passed down from generation to generation as sacred guidelines for living. Among these traditions, one stood above all others: the importance of preserving the purity of young women until marriage. The villagers believed this was the cornerstone of their moral fabric, a sign of honor and dignity that defined the very essence of their community. The parents of Zuma took great pride in this tradition. They saw their daughters as symbols of virtue and would often boast about their purity, which they believed reflected their success in raising children with strong values. My daughter is as pure as the morning dew, they would say. She represents the pride of our people. For them, this belief wasn't just a matter of custom, it was the heart of their identity. However, this idyllic life in Zuma was soon disrupted by a series of calamities that no one could explain. The fields that once bloomed with crops began to dry out. The rivers that sustained life in the village turned murky, and the livestock started falling sick. The villagers, who had always taken pride in their strict adherence to tradition, were thrown into confusion. Desperate to understand what was happening, they turned to Rabbi, the wise oracle who lived at the edge of the village. Gathered in anxious anticipation, the villagers listened as Rabbi entered a deep trance, communicating with the spiritual world. After a long silence, he finally spoke. The gods are angry, he said gravely. The purity that once protected this village has been lost. To appease the gods and restore balance, a great sacrifice must be made. Two virgin maidens must carry offerings to the sacred altar in the forest. The news sent a ripple of unease through the village. For generations, Zuma had been known for the purity of its maidens, and the elders were confident that finding two worthy girls would be a simple task. But as whispers spread through the crowd, doubt began to creep in. Had the customs they held so dear really been upheld? The next day, a call went out, summoning all the young maidens to the palace. They were to take part in a test devised by Rabbi to determine their purity, a ceremonial ritual involving a sacred pot. Inside this pot, Rabbi had placed a divine necklace said to be blessed by the gods. Only a true virgin could retrieve the necklace from the pot. The village square was filled with anticipation as the young girls lined up nervously, their parents looking on with pride. The first girl stepped forward, dipped her hand into the pot, and searched for the necklace, but emerged with nothing. A tense silence fell over the crowd. One by one, the other girls tried, but each time they reached into the pot, their hands came out empty. Even the daughters of the village chief, known for their grace and beauty, failed the test. The villagers were stunned. How could this be? They had always believed their daughters were pure, protected by the traditions passed down through the ages. Whispers of doubt and disbelief spread among the crowd as the elders exchanged worried glances. Something was terribly wrong. As the villagers struggled to understand what had happened, attention soon turned to a young woman named Elana who had recently moved to Zuma from the city. Elana was unlike anyone the villagers had ever seen. She was strikingly beautiful, with flowing hair, confident eyes, and a wardrobe filled with colorful, revealing clothes that made her stand out wherever she went. Her presence in Zuma had been a source of fascination and envy, especially among the village girls who secretly admired her daring style and bold attitude. Ilana walked through the village like she owned it, her every step oozing confidence. The men couldn't help but stare, while the girls whispered amongst themselves, wishing they could be more like her. She's so beautiful, one girl said. I want to dress like her and be noticed too. Others admired her confidence, wondering how she managed to attract so much attention. But behind the admiration, there was an unspoken tension, a sense that Ilana's influence was starting to erode the very values the village had long upheld. What the villagers didn't know was that Ilana carried a secret that would change Zuma forever. Beneath her charm and beauty, Ilana had been engaging in relationships with several of the village men, receiving gifts and money in return for her company. These interactions were kept hidden from the public eye, but they didn't go unnoticed by everyone. One day, Adia, the chief's youngest daughter, decided to follow Elana out of curiosity. Adia had always been the epitome of virtue in the village, the one everyone looked up to. But lately, she had been feeling restless, watching Elana live a life so different from the one she was expected to lead. Adia trailed Elana through the narrow village paths until she saw her meeting with a merchant in a secluded spot. Adia watched in shock as the merchant handed Elana a bag of coins before they slipped away together. Adia couldn't believe what she had seen, but the more she thought about it, the more curious she became. Could this really be the source of Elana's wealth and confidence? Adia had always followed the rules, upheld the traditions, but now she felt tempted to explore what life could be like if she didn't have to live under such strict expectations. The next day, Adia approached a merchant who had been eyeing her for some time. After a brief conversation, she agreed to meet him in secret. Just as Elana had done, Adia received gifts and money in exchange for her time, and she couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. For the first time, she felt special in a way that had nothing to do with her upbringing or family name. Thrilled by this new experience, Adia couldn't wait to share her discovery with her closest friends. Soon, word spread among the village girls about Ilana's secret, and one by one, they began to follow her example. They started dressing more boldly, adorning themselves with makeup, and seeking the attention of men. What had begun as an innocent admiration for Ilana's style had now turned into a full-fledged rebellion against the village's traditions. The girls felt empowered by the attention and gifts they received, completely forgetting the values they had been taught since childhood. Ilana, seeing the growing interest among the girls, decided to take matters into her own hands. She began organizing secret meetings between the girls and the men, taking a share of the gifts in exchange for arranging the encounters. It's simple, she told them. Just be nice to the men and you'll get everything you want. The girls, hungry for the excitement and rewards, eagerly followed her lead. But as more and more girls got involved, the situation spiraled out of control. What had started as a few girls seeking gifts quickly spread throughout the entire village. The girls began living double lives, attending village gatherings and participating in daily chores by day while secretly meeting with men by night. The purity that had once been a source of pride in Zuma was now all but forgotten. As the months passed, the curse that had plagued the village worsened. The fields turned barren, and illness spread like wildfire. The villagers, oblivious to what had been happening behind closed doors, remained confused and fearful. They continued performing their rituals and making offerings, unaware that the very traditions they were trying to protect had already been shattered. It wasn't until the disastrous results of the virgin pot test that the truth began to emerge. The villagers were shocked to learn that not a single girl in Zuma was pure anymore. The elders, who had always taken pride in their strict adherence to tradition, were faced with the grim realization that their values had been completely undermined. In their search for answers, the blame quickly fell on Elana. She was accused of leading the girls astray, corrupting them with her city ways, and causing the gods to turn their backs on the village. The once admired Elana was now the target of everyone's anger and resentment. The elders demanded that she take responsibility for the chaos she had brought upon Zuma. In a desperate bid to save the village, the elders decided that Elana would be the one to carry the sacrifice alone. She would journey to the sacred altar deep in the forest, where she would present the offerings and beg the gods for forgiveness. It was her last chance to make amends for the damage she had caused. With the weight of the villagers' expectations on her shoulders, Ilana set off on the long and treacherous journey. For 2 days, she walked through dense forests, her feet blistered and her spirit broken. As she trudged through the darkness, she reflected on the choices that had led her here. The attention and admiration she had once craved now seemed meaningless in the face of the suffering she had caused. Ilana realized that she had been chasing something empty and fleeting, and in doing so, she had brought misery not just upon herself, but upon everyone she cared about. When Ilana finally reached the sacred altar, she placed the offerings before the gods and knelt in prayer. Tears streamed down her face as she begged for forgiveness, not just for herself, but for the entire village. In that moment, Ilana understood the true value of the tradition she had scorned. They weren't just rules meant to control, they were the foundation of a life lived with integrity and respect. As she made her way back to Zuma, Ilana noticed a change in the air. The curse had been lifted, the plants that had withered began to revive, and the sick animals showed signs of recovery. The villagers, relieved to see the signs of renewal, welcomed her back, but they did not forget the pain she had caused. The elders, while grateful that the curse had been broken, decreed that Elana would spend 12 years in isolation, tending to the village shrine as penance. During this time, she was forbidden from interacting with the other villagers and would be responsible for performing all rituals and sacrifices to the gods.